Hello and welcome. This is rooflemonger. My friends, it's that time of year again. We are about to hit the Game Awards season. Our big end of year gaming hullabaloo that, if you want to be positive about it, is here to help celebrate creators and companies that make video games. And if you want to be a bit more reductive, is a marketing vessel for new announcements. And hey, wouldn't you know it, this year, I guess you could say there's some little bit of a controversy going around. And you could say that for this year, you could say that for last year, you can say that for literally every year this event's been going on. But they put out the nominees for quite a few categories. So best fighting game, for one. We are a fighting game channel here, we're definitely going to talk about this, but I do want to talk about just overall game of the year for one moment. A lot of the mainstream controversy comes from game of the year, well, as it usually does, because Elden Ring's DLC expansion is up for game of the year, and DLC is never considered eligible, period, for game of the year, and yet here we are. Jeff Keighley is definitely very favorable to From Software, and that's not a knock, I love Jeff Keighley, fellow Canadian. But he certainly is the kind of guy where if he likes something, he'll let you know, and not only will he let you know, he'll force it down your throat. I'm not particularly looking forward to this year's 20-minute Hideo Kojima jerk-off session, basically. But Jeff is the man who slayed E3. He won the war, so he gets to dictate the terms. But yeah, just odd choice. Ever since the advent of DLC being eligible for Game of the Year never really been a thing, and now here we are. It doesn't really matter to me because it's not Game of the Year to me, because that's very clearly metaphor. I beat it with 58 hours on the clock on hard mode. I never play games longer than 20 hours anymore unless they're fighting games. Game is a legitimate treat. If you like the Persona style games, it's literally the best one. And I'm a diehard Persona 4 guy, and I'm telling you, this is the best Persona game. Anyways, just want to get that out of my system. Doesn't really matter. You can vote. Your vote doesn't matter, because the way voting works is 90% of the vote just goes to the judge vote, and the user vote only counts for 10%. And knowing some of the judges on this thing, well, Erdtree's basically a given, although there's a small chance Balatro might take it. Alright, so that's out of my system, Metaphor Game of the Year. But now let's talk about the fighting game end of things here. Game Awards and fighting games have been contentious at times. Let's go back to the Game Awards 2022. We had some interesting choices, but then we had games like Sifu on there. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Sifu is a perfectly interesting game, right? But is it a fighting game? Not really. It is a game wherein there is fighting, sure, but that is also basically almost every game ever made, where you fight people. So, best fighting game, certainly an odd pick, right? And then, as well, in the year that the King of Fighters 15 launched, it wasn't the winner. The winner went to Multiverses. And you know what? That's a good wrapping point to bring us to the Game Awards 2024, because Multiverses is here again. Now, I'm not here to say it didn't deserve to win or whatever last time. I personally like King of Fighters more. I think anyone watching that would know that. But the fact that it's here again years later. They did pull their little stunt where it's oh, actually before, that was the beta. Even though they never marketed it as such at the time, but that was the beta, and now we're out for real this time. So it gets to be on 2 Game of the Year lists, I guess. So before we really dig into this here, let's just go over the list as we have it. So first off, Tekken 8, naturally, of course, right? Tekken came out very early in the year, and it's the biggest fighting game release of the year, sure. Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, and hey, awesome, glad to see it here. Technically, it didn't come out this year, it came out at the end of last year, but due to how awards show work, it wasn't exactly eligible to be nominated at the time. Now it is, so it's on this year's list, and awesome. Good game, love the game. And Multiverses, as we mentioned, this is technically the year it came out, which, if you want to buy that new line of marketing, well, that's on you, I guess. But regardless, they've been putting in the work this year, right? They've been putting out stuff. The Marvel vs. Capcom collection has been incredibly well received. I do have an issue with it, which we'll get into, but still, it's here. And Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So that's our 5 games that make up the fighting games for Fighting Game of the Year 2024 at the Game Awards. Sparking Zero is one of those deals where one of these is not quite like the other. This is an arena fighter, which is debatable whether you can call this a real fighting game. I have my own thoughts on the matter, which made me the villain of the internet for the day. Rest assured, it's not the game I would vote for. And seeing this on the list makes me realize what's not on the list. There is no Rivals of Aether 2. Granted, it did launch later this year, right? But still, it launched in October. It's not like last minute skirting the deadline like, say, Grand Blue was last year. The Game Awards does have a deadline, but that deadline is later in November. So seeing nothing from Rivals 2 kind of raises an eyebrow. And what raises an even bigger eyebrow is there is no Under Night In-Birth 2 here. Now, yes, granted, if you recall the launch, they picked like the worst possible time to launch the game because it came out just a couple days before Tekken 8. I have no idea why they went with that date, but bad launch timing aside, going up against a much larger game, it's not like the game didn't come out. And Uni 2 is a friggin' awesome game. It's not like there's tons of new fighting game releases every year to begin with. Like sometimes for Game of the Year awards, like categories best fighting game, it's a struggle to fill the slots. And for Uni 2 to not be here at all, when you do put in Sparking Zero, you have Multiverses making multiple appearances, it is indeed a real noodle scratcher. Not saying necessarily it's guaranteed to win the category or nothing, but it does feel like a complete snub not to have it there. So, certain games missing, I don't know, like I don't make the shots here, obviously enough, right? It just feels odd. And now, returning to Multiverses for a moment here, maybe we're being a little silly here, but since the beta counted for Multiverses and was good enough to be Fighting Game of the Year, then surely the 2XKO Alpha Lab, like the beta for 2XKO, that has to count as well, right? Like, okay, yeah, am I being stupid? Sure, whatever. But you can't argue the facts that on paper, a fighting game beta was Game of the Year. Therefore, logic dictates that all fighting game betas should be eligible for Fighting Game of the Year as well. Then, of course, there's the whole issue of it being nominated multiple times in the same category. Why isn't it Best Ongoing Game? Like, it's its own actual category, right? If you're saying Multiverses deserves to be here because of the very support, and it does have very good support, I don't want to take that away from the game. It does have very good support, then it probably should be there. Also, wrapping back around, Shadow of the Erd Tree should probably be there as well because it's Best Ongoing Game, right? But yeah, Multiverses, it just makes a lot of weird arguments, right? Like, obviously I'm joking with the 2XKO thing, but then why not bring back Street Fighter 6? Because the game's still going, or could still get a new DLC. So if Multiverses is here for a second time, why not Street Fighter 6? I don't know, the whole thing just rubs me really the wrong way. Like, yes, technically, this is the year Multiverses came out, quote unquote, but the game already won Game of the Year for fighting games. It's so ridiculous of a concept to have it here again. Like, I know none of this really matters, because unless something absolutely insane happens, Tekken 8 is winning this category this year. Like, let's call it for what it is, right? I don't really see any future where Tekken 8 doesn't win. Like, if Tekken 8 doesn't win, it would effectively be a scandal. But still, there is one other game I want to mention here that just seems really odd to me, and that is the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. Like, cool collection, good collection, not arguing the quality of it. It's fantastic. But the fact that it is a collection, and it's a collection of a bunch of 20-plus-year-old games. And of course, the main selling point of the collection is Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and a vote for this collection is saying that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the best fighting game of 2024. And now I know some of you watching are like, yes, of course, yes, Marvel is the best fighting game of 2024, right? And sure, whatever, like, you know, you do you. But it's just a real odd pick. Like, yes, once again, the collection itself is actually fantastic, but the collection is the sum of its games, and they're all ancient games, and you're saying then these ancient games are the best game of 2024. And keep in mind, once again, there's no Rivals, there's no Under Night and Birth 2 on this list. Games that actually came out this year. Like, next year we have the Capcom vs. SNK collection, right? Is Capcom vs. SNK 2 the best fighting game of 2025? Well, hey, maybe it is. So yeah, I just wanted to have a little bit of discussion about this. It just seems a bit more oddball than it usually is. Maybe not as absolutely out of left field like Sifu was a couple of years ago being on the list, but still, there's a couple head scratchers here. Once again, I very firmly believe Tekken 8 just kind of runs away with it. Like, how does it not, really? But I am a fighting game guy, and you know, my chosen genre, the one I've been fighting for my whole life, when I see some oddities here, when the few times fighting games ever get presented on the grand stage, I just want to throw in my 2 cents about it. I'll certainly be watching along. I'll probably do a stream along as well. Every year, the show is really good, right? There's always their silly moments. There's always the big meme moments. There's always a controversy or two. But overall, I think the presentation of the show is really solid. You know, you have the awards, you get the people on stage, usually some really heartfelt speeches. You have some really cool acts like this act from last year. Actually, I would love them to have like a big orchestra for the Metaphor main battle theme. I don't think that'll happen though. And of course, naturally, the big reveals, right? This year, I think, is going to be a pretty damn good year for fighting games. At minimum, you can expect SNK doing something there. SNK is at every version of all the Keighley events, right? So either like a new just plain old City of the Wolves trailer, maybe a reveal of a new character. We still technically don't know who the boss is yet, right? So maybe it could be Kyne. Maybe it could be an all new character. I've speculated Marie Howard in the past. Don't know if that'll actually happen, but it'd be cool. And they did say there was going to be a beta, right? So drop a new trailer, show off a new character and say beta so-and-so date in January or February. That'd be pretty nice. For Capcom, hey, Terry and Mai made their debut at the Summer Game Fest, which is another Jeff Keighley event. And, well, it really depends on when Mai is coming out, but if Mai is coming out in January, then it's a very safe bet she'll be here. It is indeed the last big stage of the year for gaming in general. Although if it's going to be an Ed situation and she launches like either at the end of February or in March, God forbid, then we'll see, I guess, and probably not there. And then there's the potential main event, at least to me. Every year I get hopeful for a new Virtua Fighter and it never happens, except if you've been following along on the channel recently, it is happening now. Maybe it wasn't announced in the most ideal way, you know, certainly no big trailers like at the Game Awards, but it is announced. Like last year, I spent all the usual time on the internet tricking myself into believing there could be a new Virtua Fighter announced at the Game Awards. And then sure enough, last year's Game Awards, Sega came out friggin' swinging, right? They announced that like, oh, by the way, all these classic games, all these classic franchises, we're making new games for all of them. Except, well, all of them except Virtua Fighter, right? Now, I famously handled this lack of Virtua Fighter news with grace and dignity. But you know what? This time, it's announced. All we need is the trailer. And Sega came out swinging last year, so who's to say they're not going to do something big this year? And Virtua Fighter would be a pretty big deal to reveal at the Game Awards this year. Once again, it's definitely happening. It's just a matter of time now. The and more, that is Virtua Fighter. So all we got to do is wait. We'll see when, I guess. I don't know when, but it's coming. But yeah, SNK, like 100%. Capcom, I would say more than likely. Sega, it's going to happen at some point. And there could even be more announcements that we just don't know about. We are not thinking about. Who knows, right? There's always surprises at the Game Awards. And well, that's just some of my thoughts about the Game Awards in general, from the categories and the nominees, and also the potential cool reveals that could be happening. If you got some thoughts on the matter, especially, you know, about some of the categories, either fighting game or game of the year or whatever, I'm sure there's a bunch of drama about the categories I'm not even aware of, or if you just want to talk about the Game Awards in general or the potential reveals in general, by all means, post in the comments below. Otherwise, this is the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some fighting games.